So we're here to talk about innovation in the entertainment space, and I know they've divided it between entertainment and sports, so we're not dealing with sports over here, even though some of the people on this panel do have sports in their midst. We're dealing more on the entertainment, music, and weather. We're going to figure out how that fits into this side of the equation. So I'm just going to kind of just go along the line and let's talk about some of the major themes we spoke about before, which was consumer engagement and distribution, and which is driving which. Is innovation being driven by consumers and how they're engaging with stuff, or is it the other way around? Like, do you want to take it at the end, Stephen? Steve from iHeart. There's two Stevens, so I'll do both. Try to divide it.
I mean, what an exciting time to, I think, be in media, because it is changing landscape so quickly. I think ease of use is really what we see happening, especially on the voice side, of how people are consuming any type of audio and even video for smart TVs and so on. So I think where it took 8 years for people to get accustomed to mobile devices, we're seeing that penetration in almost 2 to 3 years on voice, and just all of the CE home platforms. I think use back in home is happening, and that's a good thing for our business.
Yeah. So on the music side, it presents it. On one side, the benefit is that there's a demographic of people, like older people, who would say to you, we're not streamers, we don't stream anything. But on these new platforms, they're becoming accidental streamers, because they're just saying, play me driving songs from the 60s, or, I'd like to hear music to garden to. And all of a sudden, we now have them back into the technology space and streaming where we didn't. The challenge of that is when we come out of a business like the music business, where we've spent so much of our time, and this goes to other businesses as well, dealing with marketing and promotion from a visual perspective. What did things look like? Who do the people look like? We get invested in what she's wearing, and now you're like basically having to figure out how to market and promo something with no visual at all. And so what does that mean in the space of music and entertainment, and even your space, Neelay, where you are at BBC?
Certainly from our side, it's a particularly interesting area because, look, the BBC's job is to try to inform, educate, and entertain at the widest levels possible, right? And so when we think about things like disruptive technologies like voice, is not to actually get hung up on the actual current state of affairs. And we start our innovation layers so far in advance. We try to get so far ahead of the wave, the curve, so we can start to really think about that next level of engagement. So when we think about things like voice, the actual conversations we're having right now is around, right, so we're going to have like right now it's speakers in a corner, right? We're like, actually, should we be really thinking about the fact there's going to be like microphones in every single part of your house, in your car, at work, each with their own runtime running on it, each with a runtime that we don't have control over, because either Google, Apple, or Amazon's controlling that, and they're trying to sell their own special wares. And that's kind of one half of the equation. The other half of the equation is everyone broadly over the age of 10 going to have headphones on, wireless headphones, cochlear implants, et cetera? And how do we plan into an environment like that, right? And so we've started kind of thinking about all the way from the way we create our content, all the way to what types of content we make, and then how we distribute it. So when you think about that, the world just gets opened up into all the interesting new storytelling formats you can start to create with, right? So if you atomize your content, if you use natural language processing with deep learning at the point of where the voice hits the microphone, and you're able to apply some really interesting technology to rethink storytelling, you get to really explore all the radical ways you can interact with people in the car on the way home, really personal in their ears all the way through. And so and then joining that up, of course, with television and the other aspects that we've got. But yeah, it's a fascinating time right now.
And so, Stephen from AccuWeather, that sort of dovetails on something you were talking about before, where it's like, somebody would not naturally think of you in this space, and how do you fit in this space, and how have you been fitting in this space, and then looking forward and what that means to the partners that you've had.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think, especially to my cohorts on the left and right here that have been, rebranded but been around. I mean, the traditional media space, we've been partners with and creating content for that. And I told the story upstairs that if you think about weather is a content element on these different platforms and throughout the story. The difference is I might be a supporting actor where they're the lead in this case here. But the same rules apply, meaning, you asked the question at the beginning about, what's driving the innovation here. It is audio. However, even though I would say that almost everybody up here has been producing audio content and telling audio stories, so to speak, the different ways that these new platforms, the users are expecting to engage with that, I think that is what's driving the innovation. And I'll give a quick story that I was sharing with Steven over here. We launched a branded podcast, like every other major brand is doing. Okay, so we launch a podcast. In 6 weeks, we get to so many streams, so many listens. And we thought we nailed it. Like, we're going through, this is exactly what people want to hear. And then somebody on the team said, you know what, I just want to do kind of like a 2.5 minute weather flash briefing. And my initial response was like, why, right? Like, why do that? Within 1 week, we had more streams of that 2.5 minute segment than we did of the flagship, what we thought we knew. And so to me, that was one of the proof points of, while I might think I know what's going on, the platform in a lot of ways and the users are driving that innovation back because of the feedback they give you on what they're going to accept and not accept.
And what, just quickly before we come back to Neelay, at Entercom, like, you guys go across so many different formats. You have sports, you have talk, you have music, you have events. What are you finding in your business? Is it similar, where the consumers are sort of demanding a different way to engage with technology and innovation, and then you're having to meet that? Or are you guys as far ahead as BBC is in regards to trying to anticipate, or just go way far out than we're even thinking?
Yeah, I think it comes back to the phrase, content is king. Before technology and digital, there was 2 ways to deliver content, whether it be through radio or TV, and it was very linear. So it's rethinking how do we still keep content as king, but now using all the different platforms, and they're kind of driving how we deliver those experiences, but we're the ones that own the content and can create the content. So it's making sure that we still create great content, the reasons why we have millions of listeners across all of our brands, and then having the supporting technology to deliver that content across the mediums and the platforms of today, but also the ones that are happening in 5-10 years.
So I'll ask something controversial of the three of you that are all of us that have to sort of feed the radio thing, which is that in our world, and especially in my world, where you're right at the beginning, where the song is the king, and the song and the content and the creative IP is the king. Now we have AI in that world, and we do know that there are people out there who are making songs fully AI created, slipping it into the Spotifys of the world, the chill playlists and all of these things that you guys listen and probably work to. Half of that's not created by humans anymore, and really doesn't have a huge human element in it. For me, I'm a bit of a traditionalist in that perspective, and I still think songs made by real people are good things. But real songwriters are using AI in their worlds, and they're using it to create content as well, not just music, and other creative contents. And what do you think about that as the people that are pushing those contents out to the market? How concerned are you that the connection, to your point about content is king, the connection with the human and the star factor, or the things that have been driving content all this time, potentially goes away for the ease of use and less expensive content? What do you think is going to happen?
I'll touch first on an even more controversial topic, which is the notion of content is king, which, coming from the BBC, and we commission about $2 billion worth of TV and radio a year directly ourselves, and so you can imagine an organization like that, content is always referred to as king. And recently, we've had to now start to break that cultural kind of mindset down, which is, as you can imagine, very controversial. This whole notion that, content combined with digital, combined with technology, combined with distribution capabilities is now a partnership. So now we got like the king, the queen, the princelings, and we're trying to bring it all together without offending,
Very
of
British
course.
Of you,
yeah.
princelings.
Hey, and trying to bring that together, which in itself is a real challenge, I think, because if you don't start to think about how you reinvent content in itself with a technology base in it, and just keep holding on to the notion that a song's a song and that a 45-minute or a 60-minute video is a 60-minute video, I think we're all going to be a bit screwed. But when it comes to sort of application of technology from that, I've got two really quick examples. One is from a video, we just, at the BBC, we had a go at trying an AI implementation where we captured a live panel show, like a show format where, kind of like this, where there's a host and some panelists, and we trained an AI, a neural net to basically, based on some heuristics rules and some data sets, and it actually executive produced the show live, and basically eliminating an entire swath of people and jobs in the process. But it was a fascinating experiment just to see if that would work. I mean, it was terrible, but we gave it a go, and you got to start somewhere, right? But the other thing is a really interesting application around how you use algorithms to curate content, and whether it's going to be human driven. I think it's a great question for all you guys. Like, to what degree are you guys thinking about that application? Right? Where is it that human, from a consumer perspective, do you think there's greater value in getting the algorithms involved in giving us what we want at even time, or
for sure.
not, right?
I feel like it's funny. Like I understand the concept of human curation where it comes to like radio, coming out of radio, in radio and all those kind of things. But the reality is, if you put most of your playlists on shuffle, like 99% of the time, it's going to come up with what people want to hear in the way they want to hear it. So that is an interesting thing, because it really does speak to being able to, unfortunately, eliminate a whack load of people in the process and automate so much of this when you're trying to deal with technology, like we were talking about, starting with voice, where it's like all that stuff in the background, you're having to spend so much time thinking about how people are going to interact with it on the other end versus what's coming out the back end.
Yeah, I mean, both companies and users all say they want personalization or some kind of recommendation, but 90% of Americans still listen to the radio, where they have no choice. They get told what the PDs are playing them, and that still works really well. Maybe not in like the big metro areas where it's commuter cities. So I think there's a balance there, and taking the experts in our industry and thinking of content differently. So content is still king, but it's probably more 30-second pieces or different combinations of it, not the one-to-many linear streams that we're all used to.
And what about like discovery is the other, hearing what you want to hear versus getting to hear the things you never knew you were going to like to hear.
Yeah, and that I think is and Stephen at the end, I think that's going to be the ultimate challenge for people like ourselves, major labels, publishers, where we're trying to create content, and it's like, it's easy if somebody says, can I hear, driving songs from 1960? The number one search thing on these things it's high up there is music, that's the first thing, and then people search by decades, and then they search by genre. That's all they have. So how are we now going to get a brand new artist that no one's ever heard of? How are we slipping them into those algorithms? And what's going to become really important is data, and the metadata even more than it's been. And it's funny because the music industry has long put AI to use in these situations, and of course sometimes they get it horribly wrong. I one time saw Nickelback classified as Christian rock, which was like hilarious, and that went horribly wrong for the person that was looking for it. So you can just imagine. And then at one point they had like a group of people in India classifying music and doing all this stuff, but it wouldn't do hip hop because the lyrics offended them. So then they had to employ a bunch of college students in the States. So it's like, I'm assuming very soon AI will be put to use in trying to bring some data to bear. But like Stephen, at the end, like, what do you think about like the curation versus learning? Like, where's that going to go in your world?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably one of the biggest questions that's going to come out is, what's your brand voice? And so that's just starting to be a consideration. And it's about, are you talking to the consumer as B2Z or QVC? Because when you have a speaker inside of your home, and I'll get back to music in 1 second, but it's really about a personal conversation you're supposed to be having with this voice. So I think what you're going to see within this next year is TTS is going to go away. And TTS is really Alexa or Google speaking back to you and saying, yes, I'll get that right now. And instead, on the radio side, but just in general consumption, you're going to have a voice that you trust from a brand speaking back to you. So almost 50-60% of consumption right now on those voice speakers is music. Or what time is it? I think is a close second. But what we have to do is not just syndicate what we already are doing on radio, but and other platforms, but find a way to speak to the users because they're in the home, they want to feel safe. Is it timely? How do we do new content that's creative, whether it's weather, whether it's traffic? Both utility and creation, I think, are going to be very important in this space.
So the one thing I'll say is we did you talk about recommendations, right? And we did an integration with Spotify where they took some of our historical weather data and in an attempt to try to create recommendations using that weather data, based on location, where you're at, essentially, here's what the playlist would look like in Los Angeles versus what it looks like on a rainy day in New York. And now, by no means is that the answer key to this.
Very cool,
but it's step one in trying to figure out that problem, which is how do you ultimately create and create new outlets for
with
whether it's artists,
personalization.
Personalization like that. And I also think some of these platforms allow you the right to play and experiment, and it's okay. Whereas others, where it's maybe more traditional, it's not going to be accepted in that regard.
I think it's going to be fun because there's mood management,
Right.
there's situational awareness that you get to take advantage of to give that's if we stick in the genre of music and audio, it's all really good fun. There's obviously then the dark side, trying to do, like in our world, public service, really trying to make sure that people don't get stuck, just listening to Taylor Swift all day long. And that's bad in its own right, I suppose. But if you do want to introduce them to classical music, or stretch the mind of a 16-year-old to think beyond the genres they may currently listen to, right? How do you introduce that type of mindset without being too sort of authoritative into the AI logic and train that? And so we're really struggling, but having fun doing it. Where we're forming at the BBC all these editorial and technology and data science councils where we're trying to figure out what is the public service algorithm that we want to start to deploy that's not going to have a commercial bend to it, right? We're not there trying to sell albums, and we're not there trying to push a particular artist. We're trying to make sure, again, we inform, educate, and entertain in equal parts, and it's a fascinating journey to go down, and yeah, I think it's going to be really good, a really good trip.
And where does video fit into all of that? Because, again, we've been spending so much time talking about audio, voice, and that kind of stuff. Where does the visual fit into that, especially in your world, because you're coming from a visual world?
Yeah, well, I think if we start, one thing that we've got the benefit of, certainly at the BBC, again, when we started our video on demand service called iPlayer, we came out of beta in 2007. So that was the year Netflix just started their experiment in streaming. So we had people that were far smarter than me and long ago with greater foresight to get started on demand. And as a result, we've got the largest VOD service in the country still. And we're going to serve up about 3.5 billion video requests this year. So traditional TV, 60-minute, 30-minute TV shows, we're luckily in hand, and we're going to continue to innovate sort of on a continuous basis. But what's completely changing, as we can all imagine, is short-form video and what platforms you want to make use of that, and the distribution side that goes with that, with YouTube and
so where's
and
the
likewise.
innovation on the video side? Because we know what it is on the voice, music, and anything like that. But what are you guys looking at in regards to where you can place visuals coming up?
So we
other
are
than the typical places like the car and the.
Well, in terms of distribution, probably less good. We have a mandate to be absolutely everywhere. So luckily we are, and we invest obscene amounts of infrastructure into being literally everywhere on 3,500 video devices. Then we just have to. You're not allowed to sell a television in the UK without being certified by my department. So we have that kind of a grip hold on the market, which is helpful. Don't repeat that in the UK. I'll get in trouble for that one. That's helpful. I think where the innovation is coming from again is how we think about screen-to-screen creation of the content and how we get to do new storytelling formats. So we've developed a way of doing object-based broadcasting. So this is the idea that we digitally capture content, and then we can start to break out each aspect of a video into individual atomized components. So if you're thinking of a news update, or weather, or even like a weather update, which is a good example, we can now theoretically separate the broadcast, the presenter as a digital asset, and separate that for someone who, say, a different accent, a local accent. If we want someone in Northern Wales, we can swap that out digitally on the fly and not change anything. It's how we start to, and if you can take that from a pragmatic base, but apply it to a creative angle around storytelling, you can have different story endings on dramas. You can do all sorts of really fascinating stuff.
But do we not then fall into the challenge of the fake news thing when you start to apply it to actual real
we don't want to give this technology to the wrong people, I suppose. But hopefully it's in safe hands within the BBC. But yeah, no, it's a fascinating story.
John? Yeah, so it's similar for you. I mean, you guys have a lot of different assets. Most of your assets happen to be in audio, but you have events, you have brands, you have all this other stuff.
Yeah, and we have a large footprint of our sports listening. I know there's a sports panel later, so I won't get into too deep. But sports is huge, and touching on those passion points about not necessarily the brand itself, but the personalities of the team. I like to tell a story and how we develop the mediums that we deliver that content on. I tell a story that when the Bills fan from Buffalo made the playoffs for the first time in God, too many years, and I was with my dad in New York, and when they made it to the playoffs, the first thing he said was turn on WGR. But we're sitting in front of a TV. So how do we then turn that experience into not just an audio experience, but maybe there's some visuals represented there too, because they were at the stadium when they made it to the playoffs. They do have the reaction and to be able to call in and have that personality-driven experience. So thinking about like how do we kind of extend a little bit where it makes sense, and sports is definitely we have the passion listenership to do it.
And then, Stephen, at the end, I'd also say to you, similar to what the other Stephen was talking about, where it comes to using things like the weather to create a mood, to create something else. What are you guys doing? Because you have traditional radio, and it's great, as you said. You started off by saying, like, you're bringing that now back into the home, something that we thought was like fully lost. There's so many people who don't own radios. They don't own any way to contact with it. Is there anything that you guys are doing similar to what Spotify is doing with AccuWeather, where it's like you're joining forces with something else to try and figure out how to curate things better, other than what you traditionally do? Because you guys were way ahead of the game where it came to digital and just different types of distribution.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult as a product manager right now because everything is multi-mobile, and you have to figure out how to design for the listening experience for a head device, a headless device, skill cards, just all this new technology that was not even here a year ago. It's going to be on a smart TV that's 50 inches. It's going to be on a small device that's 8 by 10. How does that look, and what's the visual experience that accompanies each one of these musical experiences? So I think that's immediate. That's already happening right now, even before you look forward to what's going to happen in Waymo, where you may have a rear seat entertainment, or the entire windshield is a visual screen, which is not that far off either. But I think for us, it's challenging as in the audio space. What is going to be the rich media experience that accompanies every audio experience? And we have to figure that out fast. So I think it's not just musical; it could also be sports. Are the numbers also scrolling down? What's the weather as you're getting it? What's the visual representation of each one of these audio experiences?
Right. And as we talk about these things, especially voice, there's what always comes up over and over again is a privacy issue, like over and over again. And of course, we had the horror story a couple weeks ago where someone's conversation was randomly sent to somebody random in their contact list, which is just like, and at the same time, we're trying to convince people, hey, have voice in your home and use it for every single thing possible. And so what are you guys doing? Like, obviously, you guys aren't making these devices, but you are trying to connect it with your brands. So how do you make it so that even though the device might do something strange, it doesn't get sort of attached to your brand in regards to that? Like, how much are you guys getting into it with the actual device people about privacy and how your info goes from one place to the next? You want to take up?
Ask the guy with the most money down there. Because
It's hard. What a good question. Probably a wholly unsatisfactory answer is going to come. I mean, the reality is we're afraid of it. We have certainly in the UK, because of the public service angle we take, we have a responsibility.
Which is similar here in Canada,
right?
Of course.
Absolute responsibility to protect everyone's user data. In fact, in a world, we've just taken the leap to getting everyone to sign in on their service. We've been so privacy kind of hawks that we wanted to make sure everyone could just access everything of the BBC in the free and clear, and without ever even giving us their name. But I think we've had to evolve into the state where we go, in order for us to give you the best possible video experience, the best possible audio, the best possible news, sport, education experiences, we're going to probably need a few details from you. And it's been a fascinating journey around how we can be the best version of that in the marketplace. And usually that comes at the expense of the audience's sort of, there's additional friction we have to put in, where, but at the same time, what we try to do, we're just about to roll out actually, is now that you're a signed-in member of the BBC in the UK, you can now go to your own personal portal, right? Then we're doing this at scale, right? 60 million people. You can go in and you can see exactly what data we've got and we've captured and for what reason that we're using it for. And deliver that in a real positive way to go, here's what your footprint looks like. Are you satisfied with that? If you're unhappy with it, talk to us and we're gonna help you kind of manage that. And if you want to come off the grid, we can help you get off the grid. That's not a problem. And we're starting that journey. It's a real interesting process. Now the question you're having, how do we extend our ethos, our personal ethics and morals around this and our view to the likes of Google, Amazon, and the others, and Apple, and that just requires really tough conversations, right? And the degree to which you're willing to, I'm going to say, give them your content in order to get distribution and reach, right? It's a trade, right? They're Amazon's, can't really excel with Alexa unless they've got all the valuable, rich content that comes out of our organizations. And how strong of a position are we all going to take to say, you can't have that unless you meet these requirements, and you're going to let me in, and I'm going to look at what you guys are up to, and we're going to hold you to a bunch of stuff. And that's basically the position we're taking right now. So we go in. I send in the R&D team. We ask to look at we ask to look behind the scenes, and basically if they're unwilling, then we call who we need to call, right? And we're like, Tim, sorry, we're not giving you our audio content unless. And he's like, all right, let's have the conversation. Let's do it. Because they also need, they know they have to trade on trust as well, to varying degrees, as we can tell in the marketplace. But it's an interesting problem.
That's a whole nother panel almost in a lot of ways. Yeah. But if you think about it, like most things here, it's all tied together. We talked about recommendation engines. Love it or hate it, the advertising, the ad tech space have been trying to work on that for 10 plus years in a lot of ways. And for folks on this side, right? I mean, that's a core part of revenue. And so, but then at the end of the day, we're also all users, right? So forget the company names and stuff like that around us. User Steve still sits here and decides, what am I allowed to interact? What am I going to give a brand? And so, it's complicated, and it's going to become, in my mind, it'll become even more front and center. I mean, little things along the way, and believe me, GDPR is not a little thing, but when we look back, I suspect it will be a little thing. Because as a brand, you're going to have to figure out how to be transparent with the data you collect, because your users are going to demand it, and you're going to have to balance that versus what it's worth in terms of either revenue or actually right down to that recommendation engine and things like that.
For small businesses, just being able to build skills in Google Actions right now, I definitely encourage that. Even if you do that individually, there's great documentation on that. And then for big brands, like I said, figuring out how to interact with voice and with CE and home as it expands. I think it's an amazing time to be in this space for sure.
I'm good. I think I said my last piece.
John?
I think for us, it's definitely an exciting time for audio and where it can go. Building a really sound foundation from the technology standpoint, processes, making sure that you can, not thinking about what can I develop for tomorrow, but definitely thinking, the driverless situation that we hinted at earlier.
Yeah, exactly. Driverless cars, what are we doing in them?
No, how do we prepare for that? So building out a great foundation tech, building a great team, and having a great process around it.
Yeah. Neelay?
I'd say if you're like one of us, representing a large established or an incumbent organization, whether media or otherwise, I think really trying to navigate the next couple of years, I think it's really important to think about how your organization is going to allocate its time, energy, and focus. And what I mean by that, are you guys going to focus, and are we going to focus on driving our business as usual, our standard core models, or are we going to try to reinvent? And how much percentage of your time are you going to allocate to just kind of reacting? How much are you going to try to allocate to leapfrogging? And that's, I think, the difference that's going to, whether you make it or break it over the next little while and remain competitive against, our Silicon Valley compatriots.
Yes.
But so good luck, and yeah.
I want to thank you guys for your patience and your attendance, because we are standing between you and lunch. Well done. Give yourself a hand. Give these guys a hand. Neelay Patel from the BBC. Stephen Smith from AccuWeather, Stephen Radley from iHeartRadio, and John Pacino from Entercom. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.